We can and must pass common sense reforms to restore confidence in our elections. The easiest thing we can do right now is require voter ID. Americans agree this is a necessary step. If we're serious about working together to move our country forward, restore public trust, and protect the democracy our nation cherishes, we need to pass my bill today, and I look forward to all my colleagues joining me to protect our democracy. I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of Senate 1130, introduced earlier today. I ask unanimous consent that the bill be considered read a third time and passed, that the motion be considered to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Is there objection?
Madam President, reserving the right to object.
The senator from Oregon.
Well, my colleagues have talked about free and fair elections, but I'm quite concerned that this bill does quite the opposite. And I'm really quite stunned that one would think that a bill that dictates exactly how every state has to use an ID law affects the access to the ballot box for every single American, that it would be requested that it would be passed with no process, no possibility of a committee to examine the fact that every single American voter is impacted by this effort to erect a barricade between the voter and the ballot box. Thinking about how when we were here on January 6th, the boxes that had the Electoral College votes, gorgeous, ornate, old wooden boxes were here on the counter, and they're just like the symbol of the pulsating heart of a republic, the ability of every citizen to participate in the vision for their country, how their country will operate, how their children will have an opportunity to thrive, that ballot box. And so here's a bill designed to make it harder to get your voice heard, harder to get your ballot counted, being asked to be considered by this chamber with absolutely no process of committee deliberation. If we had such a process, it would be pointed out that currently millions of Americans don't have the IDs required in this measure. Well, that makes it a lot harder for millions of Americans to vote. It would also be pointed out in a committee process that of those who don't have those IDs, about 3 times as many black Americans don't have those IDs as white Americans, even though black Americans are a much smaller percentage of the American population, which means that this measure is hugely discriminatory against black Americans. And that is just wrong, to engage in that type of discrimination in an effort to manipulate the outcome of elections. Now, it'd be quite a different conversation if we had evidence that there was an actual real problem being addressed. But fortunately, this has been studied time and time and time again. We had the governor of Michigan testifying here on Capitol Hill just a few days ago, and we asked, when they did the study, the investigation because of the lawsuits that were filed related to the last election, how many people voted illegally in vote by mail? And that effort to find the evidence of fraud turned up, she said, 0. 0. And I asked her a question because I was stunned that it was 0. Certainly one person who thought they were a citizen but wasn't a citizen voted and was found. 0. 0. And there's study after study after study. So we understand what this is, and that's what would be explored in committee. It's an effort to make it harder for Americans to vote. It's not about security, because there's not a security problem. It's about the fact that this disproportionately affects low-income Americans and black Americans. So, Madam President, I stand here today considering whether to object because I believe in that vision of Americans having a full, free, fair chance to be involved in their elections, defending the ballot box for every single American, and this bill does the opposite. I object.
Objection is heard.
Madam President,
Senator from Florida.
My goal is 100% participation and 0% fraud. It's not voter suppression or racist to prove your identity for in-person voting. It's not voter suppression or racist to prove your identity for mail-in voting. It's not voter suppression or racist to require ballot boxes to be monitored. It's not voter suppression or racist to make sure your vote's in on time. My colleague wants to call any attempt to fight fraud in our elections voter suppression. My colleague wants to call any attempt to fight fraud in our elections racist. That's just not accurate. Voter ID should not be controversial. You need an ID to get on a plane, open a bank account, drive a car, even an ID to tour the White House. But we shouldn't have an ID to vote for the president. It just doesn't make sense. Americans believe in voter ID. It's a logical step to make our elections more secure. It's a simple change we can pass today. I yield the floor.